Hello, everyone. This is David, and before this episode gets started, I wanted to stop and just say thanks. The 5th annual Destination Arete Bracket Challenge would not have happened without you, because you showed up every day that we had the polls up and you voted, and you've been showing up for 5 years. We've done 3D animated movies, we've done comic strip characters, we've done Disney characters, we've done songs from Disney movies, and this year we did fictional characters from books. Who knows what next year is going to look like? You might see something on the wall behind me that ends up being the theme for next year, or you might read about it in one of our future blog posts, or you might hear about it on a podcast. Who knows where we're going to be inspired by? But I just wanted to take a minute to say thanks. We set a record as far as number of people voting this year, which is always special for me. And our goal always is just to inspire you to enjoy good stories and to tell your own stories. And if you can come together with a group of people and do that, great. And if you're doing it on your own, I hope we've been an encouragement to you. So as this episode of wrapping up this year's bracket gets started, I just wanted to make sure I told you thank you, because I would not be here without you, and the bracket would not be here without you. And for that, I am extremely grateful. Welcome back to the Creative Community Podcast presented by Destination Arete. I'm David, and this is the last of the 5th annual Destination Arete Bracket Challenge podcast episodes for this year. I'm joined by my sister Bethany, who joined me for a previous episode in this round. And then Amy has gladly and graciously decided to join us for this final discussion. Amy was part of the selection committee and then has been a world traveler and unable to join me in conversations up until this point. So I'm glad that she's here to help us wrap this up. And next time the podcast comes out, you'll see Mark. He's returned from the abyss. He recorded an episode with me, and we will be releasing that in a couple of weeks. But Bethany and Amy, I'm glad to have you guys here. I personally am glad the bracket is over, just because it's such a busy month for me with all of the behind the scenes and logistics. But I did want to say before we get started that I owe Bethany a ton for this year, because she did so much design work for me and was always sending me JPEGs and PDFs at the last minute whenever I would be like, could you send me this? So Bethany, I wanted to say thank you publicly and ask you how you felt about execution of the bracket. We crammed it all into 31 days without even having a vote every single day of the month. And I didn't know if there was anything you thought, wow, I never noticed that about the bracket, or anything you had.
I really enjoyed being part of the design process for the bracket. It definitely kept me on top of who had won what region, and I felt like I was more invested and more shocked by different people, and being the person that actually tracked the seeds across, and was like, and now we've got a 12 seed and a 5 seed in the final 4. And I don't think I would have noticed that as much if I hadn't been like working on it. But it was a shocking bracket, I thought. And it's always very revealing for me, like being able to be part of the selection committee. My tastes, my preferences end up, being ranked according to my preferences. And then I see how everyone else actually feels about it. And I'm like, I had no idea who liked this character so much. Not me.
Amy, my question for you is, if I had been able to somehow visually show how the votes were changing throughout the day, do you think you would have been more invested, or you would have had more reason to be telling other people to come vote for your favorite character?
Yes. And I'm not going to lie, I did spend a lot of time looking. I had access to the document this year, and I did spend a lot of time looking at it. And I would tell my coworkers, like, you need to be voting. Are you voting? Are your friends voting? Like, look who's winning. Is that who we want to win? And they'd be like, well, why aren't they winning? Your guess is as good as mine. Like, why are they winning?
So, because you have voted.
Yeah, exactly. And somebody said, well, who are these people that are voting? And I said, well, did you vote today? And she goes, no. Then go vote. I do think that somehow, like, if you had been able to show it throughout the day, more people would have been like, oh, I need to be voting, or I need to tell somebody else to go vote because people are winning and that we didn't foresee.
When it got down to the end and I didn't know if Elizabeth Bennett was going to make it, I kept trying to go back to the Destination Arete story and see if it would show percentages on the poll. And I couldn't tell if it was changing or if I was just like, if I was seeing when I had voted, what the results were, because she didn't ever continue to win. And I was like, I want to see more votes here.
Well, I do need to just figure out a way to be able to update the back end once an hour, and then people could be checking maybe on the website and it would be displaying maybe totals. Maybe that's something to think about for the future. But before we get into breaking down the matchups, 12,358 votes this year, which I think breaks last year's total by around 3,000 votes. So
That's amazing.
tons of people coming out. Our Instagram was our most popular platform. And then my personal Facebook page was the next most popular platform. And then it went down from there. And the Google polls were a hit or a miss. It seemed like we had an average of about 20 people, but sometimes we get 40 people. Pooh received 38 votes on Google one time for some reason. I don't know if someone was just sitting there spamming, like I didn't set it up so you could only vote once. Maybe that's something I need to do next year too. But yeah, I don't know. We may have a corrupted outcome.
Voting.
No, that was round one. That was round one when his opponent really only received 8 votes total. So I'm not too suspect about that one. But
Okay.
But yeah, getting down to the final four, the reason people are here, Elizabeth Bennett and Aslan were the top matchup, but the first one that I posted was Gandalf versus Aragorn, a 3 seed versus a 12 seed. Amy, this matchup, Aragorn won by 2 votes, the closest of any contest all year long. Were you expecting Aragorn to beat Gandalf? And what did you feel like when you saw that result?
I was not expecting Aragorn to beat Gandalf. And then 2 votes, like, okay, I didn't know straw polls, you could just keep voting. I would have been on the website voting 3 more times.
But that's not
So
legal.
Gandalf.
It was a loophole, but it wasn't legal. Come on.
Just saying. Who thought Aragorn was going to beat Gandalf? I mean, Gandalf the Grey or Gandalf the White. Doesn't matter which one. Why did Aragorn win?
Bethany, do you think we should have left Aragorn off this bracket? Like, is there somebody that we left off that we should have included? Paddington.
Josiah says every Dickens character ever is more interesting than Aragorn.
The Grinch.
Maybe the Grinch. I mean, I think it is telling the characters that ended up in the final, like there were no juvenile characters left. Do you know what I mean? Like Winnie the Pooh didn't make it, So I do think that people voted for the more like complex character.
Yeah, even the Elite Eight, Winnie the Pooh was the only character that wasn't an adult in the story that was written. So I see what you're saying there. If Aragorn hadn't been included, I still think Gandalf ends up here. So I don't know that it really would have mattered, except Gandalf would have lost to Aslan instead of Aragorn. Or maybe Gandalf.
Maybe Gandalf wouldn't have lost to Aslan. I just think he's a very complex, very interesting character.
But do you think it would have been closer if it, like, even if Aslan had won, would it have been a closer competition between them?
Sure, yeah. That's a great question, actually. It's really hard to like.
Is it just because Aragorn is handsome? Like, really?
But how many of the voters, like?
Yeah, no.
It's really hard to know because different platforms always lean different ways. So in the final four, Aslan won the straw polls, but lost the Twitter votes, and won the Instagrams, but only was up by 1 on Facebook. And it's
what's
just
the demographics voting straw polls?
Yeah, that's what I don't know, who's visiting the website. Like,
okay.
You have to be somebody that sees the link. So if I've posted it on my friends' Discord servers or on my personal Facebook page, but I wasn't really telling people in the later rounds that they could go to the website on Instagram. Like I wasn't saying on Instagram, go to the link in our bio or tap this link. So maybe that's what skewed some of because in the Sweet 16 and Elite 8, there was only like 10 people visiting Google total. And then once we got back down to the finals, we started getting 20, 25 people. So it is definitely something I need to consider about how to deliver the bracket. Aslan defeated Elizabeth Bennett 154 to 89, not really struggling there. In fact, he averaged 152 votes across all of his contests, which, I mean, you get 152 votes in this bracket and you're going to win no matter what, because we have an average of 180 to 200 people voting per round or per matchup. So if you win 150, you're on to the next round, no problem. He really did not have a close contest at all, which is so surprising to me. Now, he didn't play very strong characters. He played Hawkeye from Last of the Mohicans. He played a 13 seed in Charlotte the Spider. he played Sherlock Holmes. And then I don't think Emma is as strong a character as the Jane Austen lovers on the podcast would like to believe, just in popularity and knowledge of her. But the two toughest characters, Elizabeth and Sherlock, he won by 70 votes. So just
Surprising.
weird. Bethany, I wanted to ask you this. We talked a little bit about it offline, but Chronicles of Narnia, not a big influence on us. And I didn't know if you had any thoughts about why. I don't know that I've ever actually read the books. Have you ever read the books?
No, I think that was one of the things that was so surprising when I saw him continue to move up in ranks. We didn't read the books. I didn't read the books. And then I watched the movies probably about the same time that I watched the Lord of the Rings movies. And I was just more drawn into the Lord of the Rings. I thought it was just more like complex. So I was really surprised, but I did try to put myself in the position of somebody who like read Chronicles of Narnia growing up, or like Josiah's mom read them Chronicles of Narnia when they were really little, and then they all read them when they were older. And, that just was not my experience. So I didn't have any strong ties to any of the Chronicles of Narnia characters. So I did expect them to get knocked out really early.
Amy, you've read the books, or at least one of the books, right? How many have you read? And did you have feelings about them when you were reading them? Or was it just kind of more like everybody that I know has read this? And it's kind of, how old were you when you read them, I guess?
I read them in college. So, I mean, it wasn't that long ago. So I had watched the movies and I watched Lord of the Rings. And there's one Narnia movie that I still haven't seen because I've fallen asleep every single time I've tried to watch it. I think that's just like psych now, like it's just in me. But I did read the books in college, and it was just because everybody had read them and everybody was like, you haven't read these. So I read them. But the only thing I can think is Aslan is the one character that is consistent throughout the series.
Sure.
So each book brings in different characters or has completely new characters. Like it's not really a great sequence, whereas Aslan is the one that keeps showing up in each book. I think that if you grew up with them as a kid or you have that attachment to the book, Aslan is probably one of the characters that stands out just because he was in so many of the books versus the other characters.
Which, to C.S. Lewis's credit, times change, seasons change, but God remains the same.
Right.
So a wonderful allegory, and I have no hard feelings against the series or against the author, but it's just one of those things where I guess this is a good eye opener for me to know that the community that we have really has a connection and ties to Aslan as a fictional character and as someone that has played a big role. As we've talked about in previous episodes, you spend a lot of time with characters that you read about. To have someone like this that plays such a big role in our community's lives is, I guess, it's just good to know that and kind of know where they're coming from. And I'm happy to have these types of people in our lives. So I'm not upset Aslan won at all. I feel like I've been kind of like down about it and like, what did we do? What did we do wrong? But on that note, I wanted us to share, since we were part of the selection committee, let's share who our top 4 were. If you guys can remember or find it, I'll just go first. My top seed, honestly, was Tom Sawyer, because I think I was in 2nd grade when I found out about Tom Sawyer. And that was right around the time of my life where I was like, yeah, I'm going to get a raft and I'm going to go into caves and we had access to a big creek and a big pond growing up. And I was Tom Sawyer for many years out there, on the banks of the tiny Mississippi that ran through that property. So yeah, that was my number 1 pick, was Tom Sawyer. Amy, who did you have for number 1?
Who I had for number 1 was Homer Price. And I think it's just because we read that one book so many times, and the donuts and the little town, and it just like as a small kid, that's one of the first books I remember reading or being read. And I don't know, Homer Price.
And as a kid growing up in a Midwest town, a Midwestern kid, it was like, I mean, this was not our experience, but could have been,
Sure.
He's just so relatable. And I think like we watched Andy Griffith growing up, and for some reason, like that small town, Homer, Andy.
So Bethany, your number 1, did it have any small town vibes to it, or was it,
No.
what? No.
No, my top pick was Elizabeth Bennett. And that is just because I thought that the Austen characters would do really well. And I probably, if it was my personal choice, I probably would have gone with Emma Woodhouse, but I thought that Elizabeth Bennett was more popular. So I put her.
Okay. And your number 2, was it also?
My second seed was George Knightley, and he is the male character from the Emma story, which is my favorite Jane Austen. He's the bomb.
Yeah, we definitely need to have a Jane Austen series of podcasts with all of the previous guests from this month. I think that'd be fun. Amy, who was your number 2? Was it is it anywhere close to Homer Price, or is it somebody different?
No, my number 2 is Knightley too, just because I don't know. He's a good one. He's so patient.
But then he's also like no nonsense. He's just a very honest and good friend. And I mean, like, one of the best parts of the whole story is when he like reprimands her for being a brat. And it's like, well, somebody had to. Like,
yeah, he's very good at being tolerant without being enabling. Like,
yes.
I don't know how else to say that, but
my
second pick overall that I listed in my rankings was a little bit odd. It was Harry Potter, just because I assumed that our audience would have more of a connection to this character than they did, because so many people that I know have read the books and have dressed up like him, and whatever
Love
it is.
that.
So yeah, they go to Harry Potter world, or they love that idea. They're fans of the newest series that Rowling has out right now. So for me, it was less of a sentimental pick and more of I think that this person deserves to be up there because they have impacted a generation that I am part of. So that was my second pick. So a little bit different from Tom Sawyer. And my third pick, honestly, was Winnie the Pooh. I know he's had a lot of criticism in my DMs over the last couple of weeks. Whether it's Milne or Disney, I just think Pooh is just a lovable little bear. And I was thinking about this earlier today. I was actually having a conversation with somebody. Winnie the Pooh in its entirety was Inside Out before Inside Out, because the characters from Pooh represent different personality, like ideas and different emotions. Because Eeyore is sad all the time, and Tigger is hyper all the time, and Piglet is fearful all the time, and Rabbit is bossy all the time. And so you kind of have this idea of these characterizations of emotions, and Pooh is how to deal with those emotions. They come to him, and he is the balancing act, and he is the reminder that we just keep going every day. We eat a little honey, we take a little nap, and life will be okay. So that's why I had Pooh number 3. Amy, who did you have at number 3?
I had Fitzwilliam Darcy, another Austen character.
So
I thought he was going to go all the way too. When I filled out my bracket, I had him going all the way, and he didn't.
A little mid-century modern for the second 2 picks here. You had the Midwestern for the first pick, and then some
stay loyal at the beginning, and then branch out.
Yeah, Bethany, your third ranked character.
My third ranked character was Edmund Dantes, and
oh, yeah.
I don't know that he's really someone I aspire to be so much, but I read The Count of Monte Cristo when I was just like, I think it was the first classic that I read, and like the hardest book I had read up to that point. And like trying to like follow the like who he was, and like realizing that he was now this priest, and now he was, you know what I mean? Like it really surprised me and engaged me, and there was no way that I could predict what was happening. The number of names that different people had was really interesting and hard to keep track of. And I think it was definitely like the most challenging book I'd read up to that point. And so even now I want to tell people, oh, my favorite book is Count of Monte Cristo, because I still think of that as just being so cool. And it's not my favorite book, but it's like the coolest book I've read.
That's so interesting, because we had all these illustrated childhood classics, or children's illustrated classics of like Swiss Family Robinson and these classics of literature, but they were dumbed way down and they had pictures every other page. But you're right about, in our house, there was a copy of The Count of Monte Cristo that I guess Dad must have owned that made the rounds. And it was like, ooh, look how cool we are that we get to read this book with no pictures. And it was a thriller, and it was a mystery, and it was adventure. So I dig it. And Bethany, just kick us off on this last one with your 4th pick.
Okay, so I put as my 4th pick Jean Valjean, which I really only did to make my husband happy, because he sings the songs all the time.
So he has played an
so
impact.
hard to not sing the song right now. Okay. I really did that to make him happy. I think that I would have put like Josephine March or Anne Shirley as my own 4th pick. And I don't know which one I would have chosen, which is probably why I just like escaped it all by putting Jean Valjean in there. And I obviously am picking characters that I really like or that I identify with for my top seeds there. So
Amy, your fourth seed?
My fourth was Gilbert. And I think it's because we grew up watching the movies, like you said, when we were sick. I think you mentioned that on an earlier episode. When we were sick or whatever, that's what we put in. And then I had never read the Anne Shirley series, and I read them all last summer and was blown away. And so Gilbert, he was my fourth.
I love it. My fourth is a name that's familiar. It's Elizabeth Bennett. I think possibly the only one that we all three had in the top four. So I picked that one because I felt like Jane Austen has influenced generations of readers, and it was important to represent her. My bracket really was trying to represent not only what had influenced me, but what I felt like had influenced our community and the readers that would be participating in the bracket and people they would recognize. And she made it to the final four. Obviously, she didn't stand a chance against Aslan, as we discussed, but she faced Jane Eyre, she faced George Knightley, she faced Atticus Finch. She did not have an easy road to get there. I'm proud of her for the fight that she put up. I'm trying to avoid getting really nerdy and thinking about what it would be like to put all these characters on basketball teams or whatever, and then see who would win. So I will spare our listeners from getting too far down that rabbit hole. But Amy, as we come to the end of the bracket, I've given everybody this chance so far, and I know you read like 1,000 books a year. So what book would you recommend that people read? It can be one from this list, or you can pull a Caroline and just go way off script and recommend something crazy.
If they had never read it, I would recommend All Creatures Great and Small. But it's not fiction. Is it supposed to be fiction?
It is supposed to be fiction, but that's okay. I will back you up on that as a wonderful book, and people should read it.
Yes, James Harry.
Bethany, do you have any other recommendations? I know you gave some earlier in the bracket, but if there was a book that you've said, hey, people need to read this. I had a discussion with someone about this. That's one of the things that's really, I want to cut in real quick. People have been talking about books wherever I go. They've been talking to me about books. They've been talking to one another about books because they were talking to me about books. And that makes me so happy, because I think people should talk about art and talk about books and talk about, big ideas. And Bethany, if you have another suggestion, or if your husband has a suggestion from the background, I'm open to whatever you want to recommend people go out and read from this list or from any list.
I would definitely say Count of Monte Cristo, just because I really do still think it's one of the coolest books I've ever read. Not from the bracket. Thinking back to when I read all of these books, I would say Regina Silsby's Secret War. That was such a random book that we found. I don't even know how we came across it, but it was so interesting and eye-opening along the same lines, but definitely written to like a younger audience that would be able to just take that in. So that's another book that honestly has ended up being a favorite even now.
I think Regina made some of the committee's lists like down near like 62 or 63, just because if anybody is listening that hasn't read this book, find a copy of it somehow. Find it on Kindle. I don't care. There's a young lady at church who's in 6th grade who wears a cape and a hood when it's cold, and it's very classy. It doesn't look goofy. And I told her mother, I said, your daughter should read Regina Silsby's Secret War. It's $5 on Amazon or something like that. I'm going to text it to you right now. She's going to love it. If she likes
to buy a mask.
Yeah, she's going to buy a mask. And that's all the spoilers that we'll give for that. So it's my podcast. This is the last bracket episode. And so I am going to recommend a book, and it's going to be Watership Down, because anytime I get a chance to tell people to read Watership Down, I jump on the opportunity because it's my favorite book of all time. And my father-in-law was actually telling me the other day he's going to break down and read it one of these days, just so he knows what I'm talking about when I go on about my rabbit friends. And I mean, I have my drawing here that reminds me of it. I have more tales from Watership Down behind me today, just because I thought it would be appropriate. And all right, well, guys, that brings us to the end of the 5th annual Destination Arete March Madness bracket. I think we're going to change the name next year, so it's a little shorter, but Bethany did a great job cramming all of the information that I had for her onto the designs, and Amy did a wonderful job helping with the selection committee and then just keeping us all entertained in the DMs. My phone, like, this sounds annoying to say, but it was blowing up certain days of the week when results would be announced or votes would be set up and people would be mad they had to choose or be mad that a certain character won. I really, from the bottom of my heart, I know I mentioned it earlier, but I'm just so grateful that people participated this year and helped us set a record of amount of people participating. I think we're going to alternate every year, something visual, something written. Maybe we'll do something. Well, maybe we'll go through kind of the phases. We'll have like a movie bracket, a movie themed bracket, a literature themed bracket, an art themed bracket. And who knows where we'll be by this time next year. I know possibly famous paintings has been floated. So if you're out there listening and you don't know the names of certain paintings, you just want to go look at what they look like, because that'll be an easy one because it'll be visual and you'll be able to say, I like this one better than the other one. So I am looking forward to seeing what we come up with for next year. That's not set in stone. It's just been an idea. But I did want to say, if people have an idea for next year's bracket, please tell me. I'll definitely be posting on social media throughout the next week. There are a lot of high schoolers in Arizona that had opinions about what this year's bracket should have been. So if they want to go ahead and send me that as well. And I wanted to, just say thanks to Bethany and Amy for being on with me. And we'll wrap it up here in a few minutes. But this has been an awesome year. I've had so much fun. And I hope that the listeners have had as much fun as I've had, and that they've had been able to have conversations about books. I really hope that's the case. I don't know if you guys have anything else you want to say, or if you want to just let me stop talking. And
it's been really fun to actually see how these characters do in our community and to see what books really spoke to people. And then it's been fun to have like conversations with my friends on the side. Like, can you believe this character? Like, who are these people? Or I message them and I'm like, I can't believe that this is happening. And they're like, well, I was very connected to this. And I'm like, I have no idea. I'll read it. So it's been a lot of fun to honestly just see people as excited about the bracket as we have been. So
Amy, next time we do something literature, should we do like the books themselves or the authors, or which one do you think would be more?
Oh, instead of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
The books themselves,
that would be fun.
Would be very interesting. That would be a lot of fun. I think I would prefer that more than the author, just because, I don't know, an author can write so many different books.
Sure.
It is harder for me personally to gauge, but knowing, like, seeing the title of the book, I would be like, oh yeah, that one for sure or not.
Yeah, because with the authors, we'd have to put a little, like if Montgomery had been on there, I'd have been like, who is Montgomery? Oh, they wrote they wrote all the Anne of, oh, okay.
I'm just not that good with names, but.
Oh, it might happen. Stay tuned. Who knows?
Oh, no. Gotta brush up.
All right. Once again, thanks to Bethany and Amy for joining me on this week's episode. This has been a blast. This bracket has been fun. I know we seemed a little perplexed in this episode. Like, how did people vote for Aslan this much? But I have really, really enjoyed it. I want you guys to know I would be doing this bracket whether Destination Arete existed or not, and whether you were voting or not. So the fact that 12,000 times you chose to participate with me in something as nerdy as this just brings joy to my soul. And I just am so grateful. So if you want to stay in tune with us, if we have maybe a fall bracket challenge, we'll have like 16 characters going at it, something like that. Destination Arete, Arete on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. We don't really tweet a lot, but we're on there if you want to follow us. And that's where you can find all the information. DestinationArete.com is where you can find out how to listen to the podcast. We're on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or on Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on, we're on there. Hit that follow button, hit that subscribe button so you find out when new episodes. We got a ton of more storytelling ideas coming out this year in future podcast episodes, and I've already lined up 2 or 3 interviews for the summer, and you're really going to enjoy those with some really cool people, some comic book artists, some fine artists, some musicians. And I'm really looking forward to sharing those conversations with you guys. I've got an author hopefully coming later in the fall. So if you want to be the first to know about that, though, the first to know about all of the things we have coming up, destinationarete.com/contact. Fill out that form. Tell us you want to be on the newsletter list. We just hit 20 subscribers. Newsletter subscribers are the first to know about things that are happening. They're the first ones to find out that we're hosting a live event in Florida in April of this year. And they're the first ones to hear about us fulfilling our storytelling promises as we go throughout 2022. And the newsletter is where it's at. You can email us, destinationarete@gmail.com, or go to destinationarete.com/contact. And so we'll be back in roughly 2 weeks. It may not be exactly, but we'll see you again soon with another episode.
My husband is asking me, the pink dress, the baby dress in the dryer or no? And I'm like, trying to not distract from what's going on. Sorry.